Der ukrainischen Armee ist in der russischen Region Kursk ein Durchbruch durch die russischen Linien gelungen. Die Westmedien träumen schon von einem Wendepunkt des Krieges. Die Ukraine berichtet von tausenden eingenommenen Quadratkilometern. Russland gibt an, die Lage bald wieder unter Kontrolle zu bringen. Als Sicherheitsmaßnahmen wurden Tausende von Zivilisten evakuiert, weil die ukrainischen Streitkräfte auf sie schießen würden. Wie ist deine Einschätzung der aktuellen Lage in Kursk? Ist der Ukraine damit ein großer Erfolg gelungen? Hat Russland sich überrumpeln lassen?
Well, I mean, I think in this one I'll defer to the words of Major General Apti Alaudinov, who is the Chechen military officer, who's also an officer in the Russian Ministry of Defense. Apparently, he has taken command of at least one part of the Russian response. He has said that the Russians made huge mistakes. He said that the Ministry of Defense deceived itself, lied to itself, believed in its lies, and as a result, there was an opportunity for Ukraine. And he also said that the Ukrainians are very professional, very well equipped, very well trained, and this is a very serious fight. He said that the Ukrainians have achieved significant results. He also says that the Ukrainians will be killed and driven out of Russia, that the process is ongoing, and he is confident in Russian victory. So there's no reason for me to doubt any aspect of this assessment. Clearly, the Ukrainian government, working together with its NATO allies, identified a weak spot in the Russian defenses, and for political purpose decided that it was a good idea to invade Russia. Maybe they should consult the history books, because I can't find a single instance in the history of Russia where invading Russia is a good idea. It never works out. But I think their goal was threefold. First and foremost, to send a signal to the West that their money isn't being invested in vain. Because prior to the Ukrainian incursion into Kursk, the headlines were dominated by just nonstop stories of Russian victories in the Donbass, driving the Ukrainians out of village after village after village after village. And it was clear the Ukrainians had run out of men, had run out of equipment, and had no solution to this problem. And so and it's also clear that the West was beginning to question, what is this investment we've made? Because everything we give tends to get destroyed and thrown away. What is Ukraine doing with this investment? And the answer is Ukraine was, bringing its forces together, the reserves, to carry out a counter. And Ukraine had been broadcasting this. This wasn't a surprise attack. That's what is astonishing, is that the Ukrainian government had been saying, we will be doing a counterattack. They even told us how many brigades, 9 brigades, but we only have 3 brigades worth of equipment. Give us more equipment, we can do more. And so they took their last of their strategic reserves, and we know this. We look at the equipment that was deployed. These are the M1 tanks, these are the Leopard tanks, these are the Marder infantry fighting vehicles, these are the Strykers, these are the Bradleys. This is it. This is the Western equipment that had been provided to Ukraine. These are the elite striking forces, the 80th Air Assault Brigade, and others. They launched this attack. It reminds me of Germany in December 1944 in the Ardennes offensive, where Germany scraped together their last strategic reserves to attack an undefended spot on the Allied defensive lines. And the result was the Battle of the Bulge. And in the early days, man, it looked good for Germany. Task Force Piper slaughtering American prisoners of war in Malmedy, on and on and on. But what happened is the Germans outran their logistics. They didn't have sufficient forces to reinforce and exploit. And the Americans and British, Patton's famous pivoting of the Third Army, came in, pinched them off, and killed them. And the Germans lost the war. This is going to happen to Ukrainians. They have overrun their logistics. They can't sustain this fight. Alaudinov and others are pinching them off and will kill them all. But for a moment, the Ukrainians right now dominate the headlines. New York Times, Washington Post, everybody's saying, look at what Ukraine did, look at what Ukraine did. And now you have Lindsey Graham in Kiev saying, hey, let's bring in American pilots for the F-16s. Look how good Ukraine is. I mean, this is insanity, but that's one of the reasons why they did this. Another was to, at least, and some of the prisoners of war have suggested this, to seize Russian territory, dig in, and then use that as a bargaining chip at the negotiating table to say, we'll return Kursk if you give us back Kherson, things of that nature. So it was the idea of to support a negotiating position by seizing Russian territory. I don't think the Ukrainians quite understand what Russian territory means to Russia. The idea that Russia would trade one piece of Russian territory for another piece of Russian territory is ludicrous, but the Ukrainians and their Western allies believe that this was a negotiating chip, and so that might be the motivation. The other one was to help relieve pressure on the Donetsk front. The goal in doing this was to compel Russia to divert military resources away from the Donetsk battlefield, thereby reducing the pressure on Ukrainian forces there and compel them to divert to Kursk. This hasn't worked. Yes, the Russians have diverted forces. They've come out of Belarus. They've come out of the Kharkov front. But there's been no significant diversion of resources from the Donetsk front. And indeed, on a daily basis, Russia continues to make impressive military gains there, results that the West is ignoring because they're focusing on Kursk. But at the end of the day, not only is Ukraine going to be defeated in Kursk, the continuing defeat of the Ukrainian forces in Donetsk and in the new territories is likewise ongoing. As Apti Alaudinov said, their defeat this year is certain. Again, that's his assessment. I know the guy. I've met him, and I respect his professionalism. He's not a braggart. He's not somebody who is prone to exaggeration. He's a very calm, cool professional, and his assessments are likewise reflective of this calm, cool approach. So when Apti Alaudinov, who is not a cheerleader for war, says that not only will the Ukrainians be defeated in Kursk, but the victory on the battlefield is assured this year, that's an assessment that I feel comfortable taking to the bank.
Der von dir hochgehandelte Kommandeur der Achmat-Spezialkräfte, der tschetschenische General Apti Alaudinov, bezeichnete jüngst die Kämpfe in Kursk als Entscheidungsschlacht. Nach dieser Schlacht würde die Ukraine fallen. Teilst du diese Einschätzung? Und ist es ein Zufall, dass so eine Entscheidungsschlacht wieder in Kursk ausgetragen wird, wie schon 1943 die Schlacht im Kursker Bogen, Unternehmen Zitadelle, zum finalen Wendepunkt wurde und den Zusammenbruch des Hitlerreiches einleitete? Siehst du historische Parallelen?
Well, I mean, Kursk in 1943 was a desperate last-ditch gambit by the Germans to put together their strategic reserves and try to defeat the Soviets. I think the parallels here are stretched a little bit. I don't want to pretend that the Ukrainian forces have anywhere near the professionalism or striking power that the German forces had in Kursk, and that the threat posed by this incursion represents anything near the threat posed, by the Germans. But this is a decisive battle. As I said, the last of the strategic reserves, of the best reserves, the reserves that Ukraine was holding, the M1 tanks, the Leopard tanks, all the new infantry fighting vehicles, they're being thrown into battle and they're being slaughtered. This is a decisive battle. As I said before, Apti Alaudinov is a military professional whom is held in high regard because he is not a braggart, because he is not a TikTok warrior, because he is not somebody who is prone to exaggeration. He's a professional, a seasoned professional, a hero of Russia, a hero of Chechnya, a man who has proven his worth on the battlefield. And when he speaks, people should listen. And again, I've watched the video presentations he's made. This is a man who is concerned, but he's not scared. This is a man who is clearly aware of the difficulties of this fight, but he's not afraid. This is a man who is convinced not only in the righteousness of his cause, but the certainty of his victory. He is capable of criticizing where criticism is, when critical thought is needed. He's also capable of, telling the difficult truth. So yes, I trust his assessment and I trust his judgment, and I believe that this Kursk battle is going to be one of the decisive battles of this war.
Die Pressemeldungen der westlichen Regierungen, ob nun USA, Großbritannien oder Deutschland, besagten zu dem ukrainischen Vorstoß primär: Wir wurden davon nicht unterrichtet. Gleichzeitig verwendet die Ukraine dabei NATO-Kriegsgerät und laut Berichten von gefangenen Soldaten soll die Kommunikation der ukrainischen Streitkräfte längst auf Englisch bzw. Polnisch stattfinden. Das zeugt von einer hohen Präsenz ausländischer Kämpfer. Findet das ukrainische Unternehmen wirklich autark vom Westen statt? Welche Rolle spielen westliche Söldner dabei, auch bei der Tötung russischer Zivilisten?
Most Western nations have said that they would not give Ukraine the green light to use their weapons against the Russians on Russian soil. And yet in this Kursk incursion, all of the weapons provided by the West are being used by Ukraine to invade Russia. This is literally an invasion of Russia. Of course, the West wants to distance itself because they don't want to be accused of NATO invading Russia using Ukraine as its proxy, but that's exactly what has happened here. This is a NATO invasion of Russia, planned by NATO, organized by NATO, and directed by NATO. One of the unspoken realities of the current situation is that Ukraine's strategic reserves are comprised primarily of Polish and French mercenaries. They're not really mercenaries. These are professional soldiers who have been sheep-dipped. That's a term that means that they've been taken from their status as active duty soldiers in their respective armies, and they've been transferred as volunteers to Ukraine. There are Americans, significant numbers. These are genuine mercenaries. These are people, the United States has not allowed sheep dipping. But these are mercenaries who are in Ukraine with the approval of the United States government, whose job is to facilitate the military operations of the Ukrainian military at a tactical and operational level, to operate American equipment, to implement NATO tactics and procedures. I don't know what the percentage is of the force that has been deployed to Kursk is of these personnel, but it's significant. They dominate the tactical airwaves. They're the ones leading the fight. And the units that are fighting alongside them, including the 80th Air Mobile Brigade, are units trained by NATO specifically for this operation. This operation was planned by NATO and on NATO soil. This is a NATO invasion of Ukraine, of Russia. I can't speak of atrocities. War is a very difficult thing. Civilians always pay the unfortunate consequences of conflict because they live on the terrain in the towns that are being fought over. I can't accuse anybody of committing a war crime at this juncture. But at some point, when this battle ends and the facts are collected, if the Ukrainians and their Western mercenary allies have in fact murdered Russians, as some of the allegations suggest, they will be held to account if they survive this battle. There's no excuse for the murder on the part of anybody, Russian, Ukrainian, Western. The law of war does not allow for the indiscriminate killing of civilians. It recognizes that the death of civilians is sometimes the tragic collateral consequence of modern warfare. But every military is supposed to make sure that they do not engage in the deliberate targeting of civilians. And if it appears that one of the tactics used by the Ukrainians was indiscriminate killing of Russian civilians in order to strike terror in the hearts of Russians, to encourage them fleeing from their homes and towns, or to just murder them for the sake of murdering Russians, then this is a horrific crime against humanity, a crime against Russia. And I firmly believe that those who perpetrated these crimes will be held to account, including those non-Ukrainians. And I would hope that the United States government, if ever confronted with evidence of an American committing war crimes, would prosecute this American to the full extent of the law if that American were to escape Russian jurisdiction and return to the United States. A criminal is a criminal. That's the bottom line, and killing civilians in war is a crime.
Gleichzeitig mit dem Eindringen in die Region Kursk intensiviert die Ukraine auch ihre Kampfhandlungen am Atomkraftwerk Saporoschje, das von mehreren ukrainischen Drohnen in Brand gesetzt wurde. Der ukrainische Präsident Wladimir Zelensky forderte jüngst gemeinsam mit US-Senator Lindsey Graham, mit Langstreckenraketen Russland selbst zu bombardieren. Was für ein Plan steckt hinter der ukrainischen Kriegsführung? Will sie eine nukleare Katastrophe, um damit ein Eingreifen der NATO zu erzwingen? Will Zelensky die ganze Region in totales Chaos stürzen?
Well, I do believe that it is the goal and objective of the Ukrainian government to create such a chaotic, dangerous situation in Ukraine that the West will feel compelled to intervene on the side of Ukraine. Ukraine has been attacking the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant for some time now. The fact that they carried out this current attack is not anything that should surprise anybody. They've always maintained that it's Russia that's attacking the nuclear power plant, or that Russia's putting military forces in the power plant that makes it a legitimate target. But this is irresponsible in the extreme. And, it's a sad state of the current affairs that the International Atomic Energy Agency can't be honest about this. They know very well what attacked the towers and where it came from and who was responsible. But for political reasons, they aren't saying. But Ukraine has crossed a red line. I think all of these efforts will fail. Lindsey Graham, just so people understand, may be a senator, and he may sit on the Armed Services Committee of the United States Senate, but he does not make policy. He is not the policy maker. He's not in the chain of command. He can't direct things to happen. All he can do is posture. And that's what he's doing right now, posturing. The reality is much different. He's talking about sending American pilots in to volunteer as pilots for Ukrainian F-16s. Any American who does that will be killed. I'm pretty sure that's the outcome. 40-year-old fighters flown by retired geriatric American pilots don't stand a chance against fourth-generation Russian fighters flown by young, fit, currently professionally qualified pilots. So this is just a fantasy. Look, the bottom line is, when you dig deep into anything, even the Kursk offensive, everybody says they can't sustain it and there's nothing left. There's Zaporizhzhia. There's nothing there. The situation's deteriorating. The F-16s, meaningless. Where are they? Long-range weapon strike. That's just an excuse for getting NATO involved. Ukraine has lost this war. They're losing this war. Their military is collapsing politically. Zelensky's support is collapsing. These are the frantic actions of people confronted with their ultimate demise. Propaganda spinning, a very bad situation in a way that fools themselves as well as the people they're trying to fool. Go watch the movie Downfall and take a look at Hitler's bunker and the nonsense that Hitler was spewing as he looked at a map and moved imaginary armies, and you pretty much have what Zelensky and his generals are doing in a nutshell.
Der russische Präsident Wladimir Putin hat unmittelbar nach dem ukrainischen Vorstoß in Kursk erklärt, dass sich die Tür für Friedensverhandlungen damit geschlossen habe. Es lasse sich nicht mit Leuten verhandeln, die wahllos Zivilisten ermorden und ein Atomkraftwerk in Gefahr bringen. Wie ändert sich damit die russische Strategie in der Ukraine? Zuletzt schien Russland ja durchaus verhandlungsbereit zu sein, auch mit der Regierung von Zelensky. Wird Russland nun eine militärische Entscheidung suchen? Wie könnte diese aussehen?
I don't know if Russia was ever willing to negotiate with the Zelensky government. Russia has always said that it's not against negotiations. Indeed, Russia has pointed to what it viewed as the successful negotiations that led to the Istanbul Communique of April 2022. And during the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum, I think Vladimir Putin indicated that Istanbul communique continued to serve as the foundation of the Russian negotiation approach, except modified to reflect the reality that Donetsk, Lugansk, Kherson, Zaporizhia were forever part of Russia and never to be returned. But Russia's never been opposed to negotiations that achieve their stated objectives: denazification, demilitarization, a neutral Ukraine, no NATO in Ukraine. Russia's never budged on these points. But Putin made it clear that this offer will not be on the table forever. And when it's removed, it will never come back. Well, it's been removed. It will never come back. So what does this mean? Now, all the statements that Vladimir Putin has made talking about the need for Russia to protect Russian populations from the Ukrainians, the implication is Odessa, Kharkov, now Sumy, Nikolaev, Dnepropetrovsk. These territories will not be Ukraine when this conflict is over. They'll be Russia. That's the implication. And Dmitry Medvedev, the former president, former prime minister, current deputy head of the National Security Council, a close advisor of Vladimir Putin, has come out and basically said this. That's how this war ends. So congratulations, Ukraine. You just committed suicide. And congratulations to the West. You just facilitated the suicide of Ukraine. Russia has patience. The West doesn't. The West is in a panic mode 24/7. Russia just accepts the reality and then moves forward. There's a lot of creative analysis in the West about, the potential for a Russian economic collapse down the road. I don't see any reality to that. The political demise of Vladimir Putin, he just won an election with overwhelming support of the Russian people. One of the mandates they gave him through this election was to finish this war, whatever it takes. And so that's the path that we're on. Russia is done with peace negotiations. This war will end when Russia dictates the terms of unconditional surrender to a defeated Ukraine and a defeated West.